Welcome to Motherhood. Whether you're 18 or 80, Dr. Christina Hibbert, clinical psychologist, author, and mother of 6, is here to help you through the ups and downs, the joys and frustrations, the new information from experts, and the stories of happiness and heartbreak from real moms. Remember, if you can, tell your mama to listen too.
And I'll make everything all right.
Here's Christy.
Welcome to Motherhood. It's me, Dr. Christina Hibbert, here to help you overcome, to become, and to flourish in this hopefully enjoyable experience we call motherhood. But even with the joys and even with the good, there's always going to be the hard and the difficult and the challenging. And I think of one thing that is a major part of motherhood that we don't often talk about is loss. And it might not even be losing a loved one. It might not even be a death, but there's so many types of loss and so much grief that we go through. And we talked a little bit about that a couple episodes ago with our guest who's back today. And today we're going to get into talking about grief and especially how to help children grieve. Because obviously when something happens in our family, let's say even a divorce or a separation or a family member dies, a pet dies, moving, all of these types of things that can create loss, that definitely impacts not only us, but our children. And as we'll talk about today, sometimes we parents don't know what to do, or we might even try to stop our children from grieving because we're not comfortable. And so today's focus is all about how to help children grieve and how to help teens grieve and what we can do as parents to identify their grief and to know what to do to reach out and to be there for them and let them grieve in their own way so that we can do the same. And hopefully you guys will be, get your notepad out with a little pen or paper and start taking some notes because these are really good tips. And even if you don't feel like you need them today, I guarantee you are going to need them because your children are going to grieve even the loss of a friendship or something. It's bound to happen sooner rather than later in some way, shape, or form. So today we are going to be joined by a guest that we've had before in the past. But before I introduce her, I want to just, again, thank you for joining me here and on our Facebook group, Growing Through Motherhood, and on my website, which is new and improved. So you can go to drchristinahibbert.com and there's a whole new setup there, lots of resources. There's even a whole area, just click on it, that goes right to motherhood with all kinds of resources specifically for moms, as well as a link to take my Mastery of Motherhood survey so you can be part of my new book project, free gifts, and other kinds of things. So be sure to check that out. And make sure that you also, if you want to, check out YouTube for Dr. Christina Hibbert, Motherhood TV, and you can find all the TV episodes there. And you can even subscribe to YouTube for our playlist for Motherhood TV, so you get all the episodes right to your phone or device, just like you can do on iTunes to subscribe to this podcast there. So, we already talked about, we already kind of introduced the topic, and as many of you know, I have a lot of personal experience with this as well, raising children going through grief in, the quote smaller ways and then in the really, really big intense ways. And it's not easy because children, they grow up with grief, especially if they've had trauma or loss at a young age, and kind of changes over time. And so I'm excited to talk about this topic, and that's one reason why I wanted to invite our guest back to address this, because I think it is a skill, I guess I would say, that we as parents, we as moms need to develop, because as I said, we are going to need it one way or another. So without further ado, Kim Fredrickson is back with us today. Kim, welcome back to Motherhood.
Hello, it's good to be back. Thank you.
So good to have you back. Everybody, I loved speaking with Kim. This is her third time back. And I had her here the first time and we talked about self-compassion, so you can go find that episode. And then the second time she spoke about her own experiences with grief and the whole process of facing the end of life challenges she's going through with her illness. And it was just a fabulous episode. I got so much positive feedback on that. So be sure to check that out too, how to cope with life challenges with Kim Fredrickson as well. And then today we're going to be talking about grief and kids. So let me just tell everybody a little bit about you again. So Kim is a licensed marriage and family therapist of 30 plus years, and she teaches about self-compassion from a faith perspective. And she's written a couple of books. First is give yourself a break, turning your inner critic into a compassionate friend, and then give your kids a break, parenting with compassion for you and your children. And that book she started writing for her grandchildren and then decided to publish it. And now we're going to get to learn some more from her experiences with helping children grieve as well. You can find out more about Kim at kimfredrickson.com. And like I said, be sure to check out our last episode with Kim, where she talks about being diagnosed with a terminal illness and how she decided to write this book and how she has herself been dealing and coping with all the many challenges she's faced. And it's super inspiring. So Kim, I'm just so glad you're back. You have so much to share, so much wisdom, and you're so inspiring to so many people. So I'm really grateful.
Oh, it's just my pleasure. And I just love talking to you. So it's
I know.
all good.
It's kind of selfish too, because I love talking to you too. So I always invite people that I like.
We have a connection.
It's good. It's good. I know. I like it. I'm glad we do. I'm so glad we connected on Instagram of all places.
Amazing.
Yep, that's right. You can meet some amazing people through social media, everybody. So Kim, let's start a little bit by first of all talking about, why do you think this is? I kind of gave my little spiel about why I think this is important, but what would you say as far as why moms listening right now need to pay attention and learn the skills we're talking about today to help children grieve?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question because, and I think I think very similarly to you in the sense of, honestly, from the time the child is born, they're grieving, right? They're crying, mom's not feeding me at the right time. They don't know when I need to sleep and I have no idea what I need. Things are not right, and so they're grieving from early on and then just through all the things of life that are very normal, not being able to get the toy that you want, having trouble with friends or just the smallest things of life all involve grief. Yeah. And they basically involve this is a simple way to say it, but wow, this is my reality. I don't like this. I want it to be different. I want it to change, but this is in fact what is. And if I don't adjust to it, I'm going to have a lot of trouble in life. Mm. So I think, to be honest, I think of it as being a mother, being able to teach your young children especially, but it doesn't have to be. It could be middle schoolers or teenagers or even adult children. Honestly, it's never too late. But teaching your children how to grieve the smaller things when they're young is such a gift because it's the model that they will follow the rest of their life to then be able to grieve the really tough things. Mm-hmm. But kids who don't know how to grieve through the small things of life really have a hard time when, things don't go their way and when really hard things happen, because they will. Yeah. And it's just a way of, just like we want to equip them to read and write and make friends and do sports and all the things we want to equip them, this is just as important on that list, if not more so.
Ooh, so well said. And I really appreciate that perspective. First of all, I had not thought about that that we are born grieving. We're crying because we want to be warm and cozy again, right? It is true. And you're right. And I really appreciated that perspective shift of just that this doesn't feel right. And that, that's really helpful because I think a lot of people think, and I think this is a misconception a lot of us have, is that we only need to, quote, grieve if somebody dies or there's a major trauma, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But that's not what you're saying.
No, not at all.
No. And this is just saying there's so many things in life that don't feel right, that I didn't want to happen this way, that I don't like. And there's a grief process that should accompany those things. And so your point of, boy, if we can teach children how to identify those things and to grieve them as they go, then they don't grow up into adults who carried all that around on top of whatever happens when they're older, right?
Exactly. And then it all comes up. See, that's the problem is then when you have something huge, everything comes up that's been in there stored. So you have even a bigger overwhelming response, and if all that stuff isn't all stored up in there. So it's super important.
Well, and I'm sure you've seen that as a therapist, and so have I. You tap into something, it's like, ooh, I just hit a deep vein of pain that has never been talked about or dealt with or anything. And you're right, and it just makes everything so much more complicated.
It does. I actually feel like I used to teach counseling students how to be therapists too, and I would share with them, you know what? if you had to come up with what is the core issue that's involved in every session you will have, every issue, everything, it's grief.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're having marital trouble, it's because you're unhappy with your marriage, if you're having trouble with your kids, if you're feeling depressed, if you're anxious. I mean, there's grief underlying all of it.
That's so true.
It's very important set of skills to do, and it's being a good friend to yourself, and it's really equipping your children, and it's essential to get through life. It really is.
Well, I appreciate that too, because I think it strikes home for us, as moms listening to that and thinking, yeah, if we can develop these skills now, and every issue that we ever have, like you said, every problem that we face, every hard thing is, it's a loss on some level. So it doesn't have to be quantified because it wasn't as big as what somebody else was going through. I think we do that too, right?
We do. We dismiss it. Well, at least, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything matters.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have to be like, well, this is worse than that, or mine's not as bad. It's like, no. They all count.
Right.
They all
And as we do that, as we recognize that, then we can help our children because so what are some of the blocks to parents maybe either feeling comfortable with their children's grief, or what are some of the challenges when it comes to grief and parenting, I guess I would say.
I've got a couple notes here. Let me just grab that because
please.
So I I was kind of doing some prep, of course, and talking about, okay, so it's really hard as a parent to watch your child grieve. Yeah. I found it very difficult because there's this child you just love so much, and they're in terrible pain. And they're, especially when they're younger. I mean, it's any time. It isn't just younger. But they don't understand what's happening. There's no answers. It's so painful. Mm-hmm. And so for the most equipped person, it is hard to sit with someone when they're grieving, but especially for when you're as a parent. So, but there's lots of reasons why it's hard. One is obviously you just love your child and you don't want them to suffer. Another would be, we have our own feelings about what happened. So it could be the death of someone, but it could just as easily be they're grieving because their teacher is not treating them fairly, or a friend just dissed them. I mean, we have our own feelings about that. Right. I always on the inside, and I would never do this, but I always thought it. I'd always think, you give me their phone number, I'm going to call them up. I mean, like, I always felt like I'm going to give them a piece of my mind.
The mama bear instinct, right? It's just, you can't help it.
You don't be doing that to my kid. But, so we have our own feelings, and so sometimes those can get in the way, or sometimes we push ours down, and so we kind of push theirs down too. I think a big thing is that our own unresolved grief. So, like I had many clients who, once their kids got into school or they got into adolescence, they had the hardest time being there emotionally for their children because their kids were going through the normal things of adolescence, right? Friend problems, this problems, that problems. And the parent themselves had that issue themselves that they'd never dealt with. So when their child is going through it, unless they, were brave and knew what was going on and came in for their own work, their own emotional work, they would accidentally suppress all their kids' feelings because they couldn't handle their own. And so they certainly couldn't allow their children to have them. They weren't aware of it. They didn't even know what was happening. Right. But, it triggers your own unresolved grief. You're going to push it down. You're not going to let them have it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like experiences, being bullied, or how kids treat you, things like that even, that we wouldn't even probably think about that could cause trouble years later. But if we haven't dealt with that, or maybe we didn't stand up for ourselves and now we're pushing our kids to do it because we realize that it's because we didn't do it and we never dealt with how we felt about that, right? Something like that. Mm-hmm.
And you can often assign of that. I was just thinking that's such a good example you gave, was if we're really intense about something, that almost always means our issue is in there too. That like, I'll see if I can do it with my hands. If the issue is really this big, but I'm reacting this big, then this amount from here to here is my stuff, right? This part is theirs, and then but why am I reacting this big? Oh, it's because my stuff is getting in there too.
So good. Such good wisdom. I hope everybody's hearing that. That's a sign, again, everybody.
It's not intentional, but things pop up. But what I would say is, watch when they pop up, you get yourself into a counselor's office and talk about it, because number one, you'll be relieved of and be able to work through your own pain, which is very important. But number two, then you'll actually be able to be there for your child rather than just being a mess on the inside yourself.
So good. So good. Okay. I love it. So hopefully now, do you have another point?
I just had a couple.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. This is good.
So another reason that it's hard to be there for our children is just when we experience how unsafe the world really is, and it triggers our own fears about the safety of our children. Yeah. So it's very hard, like with school shootings and with, just everything that happens, you're just like, it's so hard to be there for your kids because you're just triggered with how unsafe everything is. And then the last one I had was just, it's very common for your children, but also for yourself, to be angry at God and question him and why is this happening, and to have your faith perhaps shaken up. And so there's a lot going on when your child is grieving. It does a lot on the inside to us too. And so what I would take away from is not like, oh, it's bad that I'm having these reactions. It'd be like, oh my gosh, honey, you're normal. Okay. Like everybody has things come up when your children are going through hardships. And there's things you can do to help yourself and to help them. Yes,
beautifully said. And I hope everybody listening hears all that and understands why, first of all, it's so important to do our own work, like you said, for ourselves, so we don't have to carry that around. It's heavy. Right. It's a heavy burden. And so that we can then model for our children and also be available. Because like you said, it is a scary world. There's a lot of things we deal with. My daughter, who's 14 now, but last year and the year before, was just terrified by any lockdown drill practice.
Oh, I bet.
And then they had some things at school where someone had called the district and was making bomb threats. And so they kept having these lockdowns, and they would call and tell the parents about it. And it was freaking me out, it was freaking everybody out, but she was just like panic stricken and could not deal with it. And so I actually went in and talked to the principal and was just like, what can we do to help these kids? I know you're trying to keep them safe and we need to keep them safe, but how do we help them? So they actually created some buckets of like, things they can do, because they were having them sit still, not talk. They had no food, it's just like quiet and dark, like sit on the floor, So my poor daughter's imagining someone's coming with a gun right now to kill me,
Right. My gosh.
Anyway, they made it more like peaceful and calm with these little activities they can do, and with snacks and drinks. And, so just, there's a lot we can do when we are in that place where we can tackle it, versus just being like, oh my gosh, it's so scary. I'm pulling my daughter out of school. She's not going to go, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm so glad you met with them. That's so good, because what you validated, look, this is serious. We want you to prepare them. Yeah. However, gosh, you can teach them how to soothe themselves and comfort themselves. You can teach them how to distract themselves when it's like, these are good skills to have. So good for you.
Well, thank you. That's the beauty of having those skills yourself, right? Then when you have them, I feel like, because I'm, quote, that's one of my specialties or something I've been through a lot even, it's like, here, now I can help other people, right? So even better.
I love that.
So great. Well, thank you. So as we have made this strong case for why we need to be able to help kids grieve, let's talk now about how to do that. And first of all, maybe you could address, I know this is such a huge issue, just the ways that kids grieve and how they might sometimes look a little different than what we'd expect. And how do we even know that they're grieving?
I know. That is so good. So, that's really good, because everybody's different, and adults too. Yeah. Right. And so, some kids are going to do the typical thing you might think, right? Which, well, gosh, if someone's grieving, then they're just crying, right? And they're talking and they're crying and they're saying what's going on. And that, you're going to get some kids who do that. But you're going to get other kids just shut down. Like they look like nothing's bothering them. They're not talking. If you ask them, honey, are you doing okay when that happened? I'm fine. Like they'll deny it. And again, they're not lying to you. That's their way of coping. They're like, I don't know what to do with all this. I am closing that door, and then you'll get some that, will express it with lots of anger, so they'll be acting out a lot. And if you talk to them about, if you get on them all over the place about their anger, and especially if it's inappropriate, it's important to address. But if they've just had some traumatic thing happen, that's what's coming up, and to realize that, gosh, they don't know it, but underneath that anger is going to be a lot of sadness and loss. Yes. And loneliness, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And so just kids do it all different ways. Some will refuse to talk about it, but maybe they would be willing to draw about it. Or maybe, they could listen to you talk about it, how you feel. Yeah. Not unloading on them like they're your support, because you should not do that. You do that with your friends. But, if you were to say, gosh, I am going to miss him so much. And, I remember, like, when he could come over, every time he came over, he would always ask me for plums or, whatever the thing is. Like, you just share your own recollections, and that might stir, the feelings inside, so that eventually they'll be able to talk about it or draw or, different ways to express grief.
Mm-hmm. And this is so good, what you're saying. And for everybody listening, it's important to understand that what you're saying too can also have to do with how old they are, how much they understand. And that's why I say children grow up with grief, because when they're little, you don't understand it in the same way, right? Mm-hmm. So then it might even be that they are kind of fine. Like maybe they have experienced a trauma or a death or something, and they are kind of doing okay because maybe they're young enough, or they're distracted enough to not really understand even what they're supposed to be doing. But then years later, it starts coming up too, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to show up right away. There's no actual timeline, right? Yeah, absolutely,
and that it will hopefully come up later.
Yeah. And I just wanted to put in too, just a couple of experiences with my kids. So, when my two nephews, when their parents died, one was 10 and one was 6. And so the 10-year-old understood things just in such a different way than the 6-year-old. And the 10-year-old's very talkative. He's still very talkative. So he would be much more willing to talk, or he would, get angry and he'd be fighting with his new, quote, siblings, which were my other boys. They'd all be fighting, and I would just, like, to me, that was a sign, okay, yes, it's sibling rivalry, but this is, like you said, a bigger deal than it should be, so there's something there. And, so that can help me identify. And then my younger one, who at the time was 6, he never said a word. And, I mean, they found their mother dead in her bed in the morning. I mean, how traumatic is that, right? And so me as a mom, becoming a mom to them was just like, I want to talk. I want you guys to talk to me. And, I want, and so I put us in counseling right away. And it soon became apparent that the little one was just, he was just like, whatever, And at one day he said to me he had a secret. And luckily I knew to ask him. Okay. And I said, so is your secret that your mom and dad died? And he said, yes. And he said, and I'm never going to tell anybody my secret. And I was like, well, I know your secret, and your teacher knows your secret. And I showed him all the people that already knew, so he didn't have to tell anybody, but we knew, and we were there if he needed us. And then I just sort of watched what he did and noticed that in his little drawings, like on the back of a test, there was one day a picture of a building with a guy up on top with like a sniper gun shooting and stuff blowing up everywhere. And then another day he'd drawn a picture of our new family on one side, and on the other side he had written a story about a monkey that was happy and walking along, and then at the end he blew up the world. The end. Wow. So again, these are all signs too, when maybe they're not saying I'm hurting because they don't have the language. But we can watch for these things, like you said, in play, in drawing, or whatever. And if I say moms, if you feel like there's even a hint of something that in your heart says, I think something might be going on, get some help, get somebody to help.
Because it's so much easier early. Later, it's just so complicated and a mess. Yes. But if you catch it early, it's so much better in every single way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if we've identified it and we think something is going on, so where do we start? Like what would you suggest as far as where to start to help them grieve or to even understand what grief is, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think I would start, honestly, with making sure that we understand what grief is.
Good. Yes.
In my book, I mentioned to you, some of what I'm sharing is in there. But
this is the give your kids a break, right?
Yeah, give your kids a break, parenting with compassion for you and your children.
Mm-hmm.
And I have several chapters about dealing with emotions and anger and fears. But I also have this, because it's so important for parents to know how to relate to their children emotionally and to help develop your children's emotions so that they can express them in healthy ways. It makes like a huge difference in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a whole section on grief. So I just talk about it. Basically, that there are stages. Now everybody goes through these differently. They're not necessarily all in order, and they're not, people can go into one and come out. But I think it's important to know what they are, just so that you have some understanding. So the first stage, when something bad happens, terrible happens, is it's either, I call it confusion or shock, because it's really both. Where you're just confused about what's going on. You're shocked, like, how can this be? What's going on? This can't be true. And you're just trying to somehow metabolize whatever it is you've been told. And that could even be something like, I know this is the silliest example, but I just heard this the other day. So our son is 30, okay? But I was finally put a bunch of pictures in scrapbooks, and I found this little note. And it was a note that I wrote to the tooth fairy. He had lost his tooth. But he lost his tooth, and then he couldn't find it to put under the pillow for the tooth fairy. And so he was 7, so he had me write a note, and then he signed it. And it said, it's so cute. He said, "Tooth fairy, I can't find my tooth. Leave the money, and I'll keep looking for it."
I love that. He's no dummy.
I saw him last weekend, and I said, "I don't remember the story of this." And he said, "Oh, I remember it exactly." He said his tooth had just fallen out on the playground, and it was like an asphalt playground, and it was gray with white specks, and he could not find the tooth. And he said, "I just stood there and I was looking, and I got in trouble for being late to get back into class because I was like, where's my tooth? I need the tooth for the tooth fairy. I'm not going to get my money." And,
right.
But I mean, that was just sort of like shock and like, what? This is not right. And he said, "I just looked and looked, and I tried to pick up everything that was white, and I never found it."
Poor guy. That's the cutest.
It's a simple little thing, but that sent him into a crisis, right?
Yes, that's true. That could have been traumatic if you wouldn't have helped him write that note and get the money.
It's so funny that he totally remembered it. I had no memory of that.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, because to him it was a big deal, right? To you it was just kind of...
You've been waiting to get that money,
Yeah.
So, so you would be confused, and you forget things, and you might be crying, you might just be in shock. So, but that's the first thing, is just sort of shock and confusion.
Yeah.
And then the next stage is denial. And so denial just happens when, something has happened, and you're just like, no, that can't be. Like, what are they talking about? This can't be happening. Maybe they meant something else. Like when I got diagnosed with cancer and then pulmonary fibrosis, like I was like, wait, what are you talking about? No. Like that? No, I don't think you said that. Wait, say that again. Like you're just in denial, because part of you is just saying, this is not right. This can't be true. And you're talking about in your life, that your parent has died, or your sibling has died. You're just in total shock, you know, and lots of things that happen to us. Yeah. And so there's just a stage where you're just like, no, that's just not true.
It's almost like you have to convince yourself or remind yourself, like, did that actually happen, right?
Exactly. You wake up,
I know that
you
feeling.
You think of how it was, and you realize, oh no, this is what happened.
Yes.
So, you're trying to adjust to the reality. Your reality has drastically changed.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, this can be from a little kid with an ice cream cone where they lick it and the top falls off. That's a grief response.
Yes.
They're just crying, and they can't believe it, and they want their ice cream back, and they're angry. Like, they grieve over everything, right?
That is true. Okay, let's just point that out, because that's a brilliant reframe, to just think of them as grieving instead of driving you crazy or trying to bug you, or
right.
They're grieving, and let them grieve. Let them feel it. You don't have to take it personally.
Right.
That's right. That's great.
And then the next stage that some people go through, I mean, it's not always the case, but sometimes, is bargaining. Mm-hmm. And what that's called just means is that you're trying to like wrestle with God and say, God, make this not happen, make it change, and I'll be a good girl or a good boy, or I'll go to church, or I'll be nice to my brother even though I don't like him, or you're trying to bargain, usually with God, or sometimes it could be your parents, I suppose, but to try to make the reality not true.
I'm thinking of like in divorces, especially with kids, a lot
Yeah.
of like they might feel like it's their fault, or if I just were
Right.
better, or, even that kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah, I'll be a better kid and then this won't be true. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, yeah, and that's a great example. And I would say that that happens for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you can just see all of it is about wrestling with my reality has changed, and you're trying to not have it be true. But then once you realize it's true, then you're trying to work through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then another big part, and we see this for some people we see it a lot, some people we don't see it at all, is anger. And so that is just the part that speaks out, that says, this isn't right. I don't want this to be true. This is horrible. I'm angry at God. I'm angry at the world. I'm angry at my parents. I'm angry at anybody. I'm angry at everyone.
Yeah.
Because this is horrible. And it is horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
there's reason to be angry.
Right.
And some people access their anger really easily and other people do not. And they push it down and then that causes issues later. But anger is just a very normal reaction to something horrible happening.
Right. Well, and a lot of people, you're right. I think that's a good one to point out. A lot of people do. They think that if you feel angry that you're bad or that's bad, but it's just like you said, it's emotion. It's an emotion just like all the others.
Right.
Now, if you act out in anger, that might not be okay, right? So we can teach kids, okay, don't hit when you're angry, but you can feel angry.
Yeah.
Be angry, yes.
You can feel it, but you don't beat your sibling up, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And we have to be comfortable with our own feelings of anger too.
Right.
Otherwise, we're definitely going to be like, don't be angry, don't feel angry. Or,
we'll push it down because we're not comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one usually is, and again, these go back and forth. You can be in anger, and then the next one is like sadness or depression, perhaps, where you're just grieving. You're just so sad. By this point, you've accepted that what has happened has happened. Yeah. And you're just grieving through, the fact of what's happened, what you're missing, the fact that if it was a death that you won't see that person again, or if your friend moved away, or you moved, or you changed schools, or you moved from your house, or, there's just things that are not going to be the same. Yeah. And so, let's say you lose your special toy, you're going to be grieving about, like, I remember one time we were going to the bank and my son had a friend with him, and for who knows what reason, his friend took my son's favorite book and threw it out the window.
Oh, no.
And he loved this book. Oh. And we circled back around, and I don't know what happened to. We could never find it. Oh. And just that, but like that was a big deal. He still remembers that.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a loss. A loss of an item, even. Yeah.
An item, an experience. Maybe you were really good at something, and now you can't do it anymore. It's just everything. Yes. So there's just a lot of sadness, and it's good to just validate that, and like, that is very sad. We do miss that, and you really wish that it was back and that you didn't lose it, and it's like those are real normal feelings,
Yes.
And the last one that we hope to, we all hope to get to is just called acceptance. And all that acceptance means is just that, okay, I do accept that what has happened has happened. I've worked through a lot of the feelings, certainly not all of them, because grief cycles through, it'll cycle through different times of your life. You might think that you've gotten through the whatever the loss is, and you maybe haven't thought about it or cried about it or felt bad about it for quite a while, but then something will come up and you're back there again, not at the beginning, but you're back at a pocket of grief. But acceptance basically says, there still is good in life and there's things that we still can enjoy, but I will always miss that person. Or whatever, it depends how significant the loss is.
Right. Yeah.
But I do accept, that life can go on and it can ebb and flow and all of that.
Yeah, that's good. And that's kind of the phase of being ready to move forward and not invest so much time and energy into the grief anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great. So okay.
I think parents knowing that is so important, because then you can explain it to your children.
Yes.
So if your child is like, I can't believe it, and they're in the beginning, you could say that if you just said to them, honey, I don't know if you know this, but it is so normal when something bad happens to like hope that maybe it didn't actually happen, and to like pretend maybe even that it didn't happen. And they'll go, it is? And you'll say, oh yeah, it's totally normal. Like everybody feels that way because we wish that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
So that validation of like this, you're not going to say, well, stage 1 is, you don't say that, but you
Right.
just validate, and when they're angry, you validate, well, you're angry because something happened that you did not want to happen. And you're very upset about it, and you have every right to be.
Mm-hmm.
So a
So
lot of
good.
it is just being comfortable with the feelings, knowing yourself what the grief process is, and then just doing lots of validating and empathizing. And there's some other tools too, but I think that's the biggest part is you have to know what grief is, and then you just kind of teach your kids that.
Yes. That is so true and so important. And, when we do have that knowledge, we can also prepare them and say,
Yeah.
you might feel this, or you're probably going to feel
Yeah.
some of this, or that kind of thing too.
Yeah. Don't be surprised. Maybe not now, but later, maybe,
Yeah.
and then it happens and they go, oh yeah, she said that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's so good. So the same little one who was 6, what
Yeah.
I was telling you about, he's now
Yeah.
17. And
Oh, wow.
just this past weekend, he just, I don't know, he just said a few things that just made me go, why is he talking about that? He wanted to go see where they used to live when he was younger, with a friend, because he was in that area and was asking for the address. And then just another day, he said he thought he was bipolar, which I don't know where, I'm like, no, you're just hormonal. So
Right.
yeah. Anyway, so he's like, I just have all these emotions and I don't know how to deal with them and I don't like to talk about them. And anyway,
Yeah.
so, but because of just like, again, cluing into these little signals, I approached him on Sunday and was just like, what's going on? Because to me, these are little signs that something's popped up for you. And, and guess what? It's totally normal if it has, because you really haven't dealt with it yet, because you just don't want to talk about it. He's like, but I just feel I don't like how I feel. I feel like I'm out of control. When I talk about it, I cry. I don't like to cry. I don't want to, he kind of just doesn't want to go there.
Right.
But at the same time, he also admitted that he feels like there's something wrong with him,
No.
And I was like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You have been through a crazy intense trauma that most kids never go through, and definitely not that young. And you've had to deal with it all this time, and you've been real private. But can I go with you to a counseling session? Can I do that? And at first he was resistant, but then he agreed. So we're going to be doing that next week. And, it's sort of like, I never expected that it would be not until he's 17 that finally he'd be ready, but I think he's ready, and so I think understanding the phases and being able to normalize it for them, that, it might not be now, it might be later. It might be when you're older and you leave the house and you realize what that thing or that person meant to you, or, something like that. So I really think that's great.
I appreciate you sharing. That's such a good example. And it's so accepting of everybody has a different process. Their personality is different. Like you said, the age was different. And I think the other thing too is that they grieve, they feel the loss differently at older ages.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
I'll just give you an example of a friend of mine whose sister had died when they were little. I don't know, maybe 10 or 11, something like that. And even though he had worked through all of that, when he got married, he felt a huge wave of grief that his sister wasn't there. He said, when I have my first child, I'll have it. Like, in other words, he really had worked through a lot, but so you think about your son who, when he's 17, maybe he sees parents, maybe he was around kids who said, yeah, when I was 2, we went here, or something. And all of a sudden he's 17 and he understands and experiences that differently.
Right.
So we'll access things because he's just at a different age. He'll be processing it in a different way. Right.
Your brain's developed in a different way. You understand things. I mean, I think even just when my little sister died, I was 18. And then when my second sister died, I was 32. So, it was totally different. I mean, even just the grief of the intensity of the grief, and our relationships were different. Obviously, the circumstances were different, but I did grieve when I was 18, but it just was different to me. It wasn't quite as deep. It didn't last as long. It didn't feel as hard. But I re-grieved that again when my other sister died, over time. So, that's definitely how it can be. So okay, so with all of these, this is a great starting point. We have to be able to identify what it is. We have to know how to talk about it, what to say, I guess, and here's
Right.
some idea of what grief actually is. And then what other tools would you suggest as far as, I think that's where a lot of us kind of
Sure.
get a little scared, is
Yeah.
actually talking and knowing what to say or what to do or those kinds of things, right?
Yes. So I have a couple things to suggest, and then you and I are probably going to do a role play, so that will help a lot to actually see
Yay.
it.
Yes.
So I just think of yourself as being a companion to your child in their grief. So if you think of a companion, they kind of come alongside you. They don't do things for you, but they're just kind of there with you. Be with them, listen when they're ready to talk or just hang out. If they don't want to talk, you can just hang out. And also give them space if they need it.
That's great. That's great.
Realize that sorrow needs expression. And so it can come out in lots of ways. We talked a little bit about it, but just, obviously there's talking, but there's drawing, there's painting, there's, I have some other ideas down here. Paint and glue, hammers and nails, long walks, music, listening to music together that means something to them. A lot of times it'll have those tones in it, and just listening and saying, gosh, what do you think that's about? And how does that speak to you? And they might even say, I don't know, I just like it. Okay, well, that's fine. But I like lots of music with my kids and try to figure out why they liked what they did at that time.
Yeah, that's a great tool. Great tool.
And just even playing and even to use the example that you gave of when you saw that picture on the back of a school assignment. This is a boy, da 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 da, and then he blew up the world. Even just I wouldn't say, honey, I saw you write, I'm so glad that, and I wonder if some of the anger from your parents dying has come up. I would think, boy, that boy must have been really angry.
Yeah.
He was. I bet he was angry enough to blow up the world. Yeah. And that must have been hard for him. Something bad must have happened.
Yeah.
Like just little things. Like, you don't have to have this perfect conversation. It's just meeting them with whatever the feeling is that they're sharing.
Yeah, externalizing it in that sense too. And that reminds me of play therapy, which is a great tool, which everybody out there, you can definitely go and find somebody who does play therapy with younger children. I remember doing that in one of my internships. I worked in a school, and there's just so much you can learn from watching how they play, what they do with mom and dad, I remember one little girl building a giant wall, and she was just in the middle and everybody and everything else on the outside. And it was just so obvious,
wow.
Yes, this is exactly what you're doing, so we don't have to talk directly like you're saying, but even just talking about the play or about that doll or about that friend or about that story, and you can get a lot of information. You can help them learn a lot that way too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great.
And then I would just be praying for your child and for your teen, that God would help them to get through that grief and help you. I would be praying for yourself, that you would know how, you could hear God's direction about how you might minister to your child, how you might pay attention to those little signs, because they're probably going to be little signs the ones you gave were great examples, just these little things that you need to pay attention to. They mean something. You don't have to jump all over it, but it's oh, there's something. And the great thing is the something is good news. It's oh, good. There's a little something, that's really good news, actually.
And I saw it, which is good. I mean, the parent, when you see that and when you're paying attention, you don't always have to do something like you said. Sometimes it's enough to just notice and know, hey, something might be going on with them. I'm going to kind of pay more attention or give them a little more time or,
Exactly.
That's good. Okay.
And just listening to their feelings and questions in a non-judgmental way. You don't have to jump all over what they say. Just realize the goal is to get them to share however they can. It's not for you to make some judgment about, well, don't say that, or no, please say that, because you want them to be able to share, even if they're saying things that bother you. Better that than have that all inside and then have it come out in their behavior, because that's what will happen. It doesn't come out in their talking, it'll come out acting out in their behavior.
Very good point. Very good point. And we don't want that. So
no, we don't.
So shall we do a little example?
Sure.
Okay. Why don't you tell me? What do you want me to be? How old do you want me to be?
Let's just do a real small child, 5 or 6, and just something has happened that happens to little kids when they're young.
Okay.
And just tell me about it and I'll just respond and,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. So, am I pretending that you're like my parent or my
How
teacher
about
or
parent?
my therapist? Okay.
How about parent? No.
Okay,
Parent.
so let's just say that I walk in looking really sad and I've got tears.
Okay.
Like this.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I'm
hi,
not.
Christina. What's
Mom.
going on?
I don't. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, so something happened that you don't want to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. It must have been really hard because I see a little bit of tears.
Yeah. I've been sad on the bus the whole way home.
Oh my goodness, it must have been very hard to be sat on the bus all the way home.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. I felt like the
Oh,
kids were gonna laugh at me, and they were making fun of me because of it.
so you already felt bad, but then you were worried that they were going to laugh at you too?
Yeah. Well, one boy said that I was a baby.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh my goodness. It sounds like you just were feeling sad for probably a good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. It just. Yeah. People were mean at school.
Oh, that's so hard when people are mean at school.
Yeah.
It hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah. Because I feel like I don't know, like my friend. I thought she was my friend, and then she said I
Mm.
can't play with them.
Oh, that's so awful. What a shock that must have been. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah, because we were just playing, and then all of a sudden she said I couldn't play with them anymore.
Oh, that must have been so hard.
And everybody else could play, but I couldn't.
You were the only one?
Yeah.
Oh, no. What did you do?
I just went by myself and sat over on the playground. And I
Oh,
just tried not to cry because I didn't want everybody to see me.
yes.
But
Yeah.
then on the bus, I just couldn't because they wouldn't
Yeah.
sit by me either. So,
Oh, so it happened again.
the same girls.
Same girls.
Yeah.
Oh, so sorry.
Because they said that I wasn't wearing the right color today.
Oh,
Like
no.
everybody was gonna wear the same thing, and I didn't know. So I'm out of the group.
That's so terrible.
hmm
I'm so sorry that happened. That must have been such a shock, and then also sad and maybe a little angry and confused. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, I was really mad. I was really mad because I
Yeah.
mean nobody even told me, so how could they be mad at me? I don't get it. Why would they say that?
Right.
I
They
don't-
didn't even tell you to wear the certain color, and then you didn't because you didn't know. And
Yeah.
then somehow you're bad, and they booted you out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that made me just feel really mad at them, and
Oh,
I wanted to say or do something, but then I didn't because I didn't want them to get even more mad at me, or I don't know. So I just went and cried on the bus.
yeah.
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 And I don't know what to do tomorrow.
I know. I know. Well, before maybe we talk about that, because we can if you want, but I just wanted to tell you, I think you did a good job taking care of yourself. I know it doesn't feel like it because you feel so terrible, like, but you really thought about it and you thought, I gotta go sit over here. I don't really want to let them see me cry. So, like, you protected yourself from getting teased further, and you did the best you could on the bus. That one boy said something, but you were really taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that even when you got home and you didn't feel like talking, you just kind of did.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you did.
Yeah, so can we get ice cream?
We sure can. What kind?
My favorite one, can we go out and get it at my favorite place?
Sure. We could go do that. And if you want to talk about what to do tomorrow, we can do that too. Or we can just go have ice cream, whichever you want.
Yeah, let's go for ice cream, and then we can and then maybe you can help me know what to say.
Okay, we'll figure it out together. Thank you for telling me. I'm so glad. I always want to know about hard things.
Thank you, Mom. You're
You're
the best. Mommy, I should say.
I wish I could hug you through the computer.
I know. Because we as moms all have had these moments where our kids come home and they're just so
Right.
sad, and kids have been mean, and obviously this wasn't an example where somebody
Right.
died or anything like that,
Right.
but those are
happen
real.
all the time.
Yes. And it
right?
hurts
All of a sudden,
them.
everything's fine, and then it's not fine. You have no idea what happened.
Yeah. And I do think even as parents that it can, their emotion can overwhelm us sometimes and just make us feel like, oh my gosh, these kids are being mean, and I just want to, you just kind of want to go spank their little bottoms or something.
I know.
But what you did was so great because you helped me to know, like, and I was trying to just be in the mind of a kid, but just like I wasn't even aware that you were trying to get me to talk, quote unquote. You didn't sit me down. You weren't like, okay, let me have you talk to me about this. Instead, you just started asking questions, see where it goes, and then before you know it, they might give you more, and maybe some kids won't. But I also wrapped it up quickly because I figure that's kind of how kids are too.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like, okay, I got what I needed. Let's go.
Okay, I'm good. Now let's get a treat.
Yeah, I mean, that was good. That was good.
So thank you for showing us how to do that. And it really is, I mean, for all you parents, I know it can feel intimidating, especially when there are big issues. But I think, what you modeled is the perfect example. It's just one, being there.
Yes.
I mean, if you wouldn't have been there when I came home, you wouldn't have seen, you wouldn't have noticed. And then being there emotionally, being available to be able to handle my stuff because you obviously know your stuff, and being able to validate, a lot of it, what you said was just like, yeah, that's, gosh, that's really hard. And that's so,
really it was just valid. It was tracking where you were at and validating. And I think the important thing too is at the beginning, I just loved how you said, and I don't want to talk about it because, and I don't know if you remember what I said, but I basically said, oh, so something happened that you don't want to talk about.
Yes.
Right. So I just validated, oh, you don't want to talk about it.
Right. You didn't say, well, you need to talk about it because
talking.
Yeah. And you made me talk because it was like
trying to honor the boundary. And it really, if the kid had said, you had said, or any child said, I'm not going to talk about it, and they storm away.
Yes.
I'm not going to hound them to make them talk about it.
Right. Let them calm down and then maybe try later.
Yeah. Then they usually just open up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's it. I mean, it really is a lot simpler. It's
simpler
really
than
about,
they think. Yeah.
It's about educating yourselves.
Yes.
And then kind of trying to meet the kids where they are, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah. And just like validating, empathizing. What was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. No, I like what you said. You're validating, just validating whatever they're saying.
Yeah.
And then I was just going to add, and then just continuing to help them grieve through whatever ways that work for them,
Right.
Like we said earlier, like some kids it's coloring, some kids it's drawing, some kids it's, whatever ways that work for them, you just try to provide different options, and then they'll pick the ways that work.
That is so good. And, I'm just going to throw in there, I created an acronym for that years ago, because when people ask, how do I grieve? I would say, well, you let yourself grieve. You let yourself feel the feelings and go through it. But when you want to know how to, I have tears. So T is for talking.
Okay.
Talk as much as you can. And then E is for exercise or physical activity.
Good.
So moving your body in some way helps through the grief. A is for artistic expression or creativity, anything creative or artistic. And then R is recording or writing down your thoughts, even just like talking into something to yourself, even if you don't have someone else to talk to, or journaling. And then S is sobbing. Just let yourself cry and cry as much as you need to. So, those are things that we can do and things we can do for our kids too.
Yes.
And like you say, recognizing that everybody's so unique. And in fact, I keep thinking of couples and how many couples, lose a child and then the marriage doesn't survive because they don't grieve in the same way and they can't kind of find each other in the midst of it.
Right. Very much, very much.
So we can do that for our children, hopefully. And the more we learn about this, the better we can do.
Right. And then I thought of one other tool. Can I say
please,
that? Real
absolutely,
quick?
please.
I was remembering, I used to use this with kids I counseled, but also my own kids, is if something terrible happened, I would say, hey, could you draw a picture of what it looked like before the bad thing happened? And then can you draw a picture of like what happened or after the bad thing happened? So like say if you lose a family member, it's a family of 5, and then they draw a picture of family of 4.
Right.
They draw, me with my favorite toy and then me sitting on the couch with no toy or whatever. Like, so asking, because usually they can definitely draw it before.
Yes. And then you can compare. That shows you how they're feeling now.
Yeah.
That's so great.
So that's
I love that.
their tool too. Yeah.
That's a great tool. And everybody just needs to get your book, because not only tools for grieving, but for all kinds of other things. So this one is Give Your Kids a Break, Parenting with Compassion for You and Your Children. And of course, she also has Give Yourself a Break, Turning Your Inner Critic into a Compassionate Friend. And you can find links to those through your website, right? KimFredrickson.com.
Or Amazon.
Or on Amazon. You can just go straight there.
Yeah.
Either way, but definitely visit KimFredrickson.com for more about Kim and the resources she shares. And she just has so much wisdom. That's why I keep wanting her to come back. When she's feeling well, I'm just always going to keep having her back. So.
This was a good day. So
I'm glad.
Yeah, I wasn't tired this morning at all. So that was a good thing.
I know, and it's hard to tell because you plan something and then you might wake up and go, oh, this is not the day, right? So I'm glad you're feeling well today. Well, we benefit when you feel well, so thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I just really enjoyed it.
Me too. And I hope everybody will take the advice that you shared and go visit your website and get the book. And, everybody, we can get through the hard times together. And, one thing that I've learned, and I think kind of as a final note, is the family that feels together heals together.
Oh, that's so good.
And so many of us turn away from each other when we're all going through a hard time. But if we can find a way to, like you say, identify how I'm feeling, how you're feeling, and how they're the same, we can be there for each other. We can actually grow stronger families and not just individuals even.
Absolutely. So, that's very hopeful.
Thank you. Well, I have hope. I've definitely seen the hope come to pass in my own life. We're doing really well. And you really can get through the hard times, but it is a long process with kids and grief.
Right.
And you do have to be prepared that it's kind of going to happen on and off for years if it's a big thing, especially a traumatic thing.
Absolutely. And that's a good thing. Because who wants to feel it all at once? It's horrible, right?
Yeah, no
so you just feel a little bit at a time.
That's right.
It's good.
That's right. Well, thank you again, Kim.
You're welcome.
And for everybody else, be sure to join us again here next time on Motherhood to grow together instead of just going through motherhood alone. It's a lot better to do it together and to do it here with us on Motherhood Radio. So we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.